fielding your questions as we go. So talking to you today myself, I'm Ian Snow, Managing Director at Central Technology. I'm really pleased that we've got Matt Corbishley from Ashgate Hospice. He'll be talking about Ashgate's experience and what they've achieved over the last couple of years. And then we've also got Tom with us. He will be looking at the questions as they come through and sort of trying to answer them as he goes, or certainly, passing them on to me at the end so we can field some of the questions that come up. So what we're going to run through today, the agenda, it will be high level, as I say. There's been a lot going on, so these are the areas that we thought would bring some value and to cover off. I'll be covering sort of the first four, and then I'll be handing over to Matt, and then, as I say, there'll be question and answers at the end. What we've tried to do in each area is pick one or two key takeaways for people. So hopefully we manage to do that, and things that will either sort of trigger your thought process or give some key things for you to sort of go away or take away from it and go away and perhaps investigate further. So yeah, apologies if it feels like it's very high level, but given that we're trying to aim for 30 minutes, then we sort of have no choice. So the first section, the sort of trends we're seeing, the common trends that we're seeing within the charity and hospice sectors. There's so much going on at the moment that it was quite difficult to condense this down, but these are the sort of the 6 areas that we've picked. The first key one that I've put there and that we're seeing is digital transformation. This seems to be very high on people's agenda at the moment, and in particular finding efficiencies and improving data capability as I've put there. I've got a slide coming up talking a little bit more about data capability, so I'll expand on that a little bit on the next slide. The other area that we've been seeing and have been for a while, to be honest, seems to be a pressure on that physical space. Premises are expensive, and there seems to be sort of that seems to be is obviously a barrier. That physical space seems to be a barrier to increase in the volume of support being offered across the sector, even down to things like parking. We're often seeing just parking space being a huge issue as sort of the service offerings expand. And linked into that, there's been a real increase in a drive to, I suppose, delivering that the support away from the main sites and in at the community, trying to remove that reliance on the physical space, but still deliver the support that's needed. And in doing that, there's been a real need for those sort of community teams to be able to work effectively and securely out in the community. And again, that sort of flows on into the next piece I put around data and network security. It's always been a focus. Obviously, generally the data sets that we're looking after in the sector are sensitive. There's a lot of personal and potentially sensitive information in there, so there has always been a focus on data and network security, but it certainly seems to be going up the sort of priority list if it could do that at all. And the remote working by its nature has sort of added additional challenges into that data security and network security piece. We then obviously we've had the COVID and the COVID lockdowns, and what that's done for probably for all of us, not just in this sector, is an enforced remote and flexible working approach. What we're seeing in the sector is that's really highlighted some of the existing, I suppose, shortcomings in the ability to work effectively and safely away from the main sites. So those ones all sort of tied together really, and were already things that we were seeing, and they've sort of been exacerbated and emphasised, if you like, with the COVID lockdowns. As is the next one, pressures on funding. They seem to have increased exponentially through the period. Obviously, funding is always a challenge, but it's the competition for that funding seems to have just gone through the roof from what we're seeing. So it's been more and more difficult to know what budgets are there, get the funding, and obviously makes it more difficult in where that budget should be allocated. So they're the 6 key things that we've seen, and although they're I've sort of presented them as challenges, I suppose. What we've also seen is they are not just negative and challenges, they're opening up a number of opportunities to improve existing ways of working, and a lot of people are using them in that sort of positive way. Just moving on to that data capability and the digital transformation piece. There's obviously digital transformation is quite a sweeping statement. In terms of sort of the data capability, what we've been seeing is the desire really to become more insights led. And by that I mean the realization that we are holding a lot of data, and sort of looking at it and saying, well, how can we make better use of that data? You know, what can we do with it? How can we analyze it better? How can we utilize it to improve, you know, what we're doing? And that's across the board, both operationally or clinically, if that's appropriate, or in the income generation side of the charities that we're working with. What one of the main challenges with that seems to be is sort of disparate systems holding lots of the data, so the data being held in lots of different places. So what we're seeing, and what's certainly possible, is looking at methods of bringing that data into one place to improve how we can analyze it, and bringing it together, and creating systems that can start to analyze that data better, create, you know, more conjoined reports, and get better visibility of sort of the trends in that data. And sort of leading on from that really is looking to integrate some of those systems where we can, and get some efficiencies out of that to reduce the amount of duplicate inputting of data, for example, which we see a lot of. You know, that sort of manual inputting really into multiple systems, which sort of stems from having all these different systems. And there are ways of doing it, and we've seen a real drive for that, which then leads on to the next point I've got right at the bottom, which is the automation. There is certainly scope then to automate those repetitive sort of regular tasks, all of which then frees up the time to make better use of sort of someone's time to make better use of the data and analysing the data, rather than the sort of administrative inputting and admin of it. Backup and DL was the next point I'd got on there, and it's a fundamental part of I guess the data security piece, and the business continuity piece. Why is it important to charities and hospices? It's sort of the same reason it's important to everyone, to be honest. And the first step we always take is sort of say, well, protect what you've got. What data do you have? What infrastructure you have? It's important to get that protected in the first instance. And this is, as we sort of see it, is the primary aim of the backup. Just got a couple of slides that are going to come up now as I talk through, which have got a few stats on there. I'm not going to run through them, but I'll just leave them up for your information as I talk through. So this enforced move that I mentioned earlier into the sort of remote way of working has really opened up a lot of opportunities for the cyber criminal, and you know, we're certainly seeing across our customer base, which is, you know, in the region of sort of 800 customers that we're looking after in various guises, the increase in cyber attacks is significant. Luckily enough, we're not seeing too many successful ones, but if they are successful, the impact can be catastrophic. And certainly things like the WannaCry issue that we saw a little while ago is a prime example of the type of an impact they can have. Certainly in the healthcare side of things, that had a massive impact. So it's quite important to make sure that you're really taking an approach of, you know, securing that data. Now backup is essentially just one fundamental element of that protection against cyber attack. It's not going to fix everything. Of course, you do need to have your strong passwords, your firewalls, multi-factor authentication, antivirus, and your other sort of system and process level security fundamentals in place. But what you need if a cyber attack does manage to breach your network, it's really a clean set of data to fall back on. And this is where a properly designed backup solution can help. The slide that I've just put up there covers some of the key points around backup. The first thing that we're looking at is your backup. You need to think about all your data. You need to be thinking about your backup covering all your data. You see the point there around joint responsibility model. The big cloud providers, your Microsoft with Azure, Amazon and AWS, they'll all talk about a shared responsibility model. And what they mean by that is the infrastructure is their responsibility and the responsibility for the data is yours, not theirs. And it's a really common misconception that, well, we've moved to the cloud, we don't need to worry about backup. Microsoft do that or Amazon do that. They don't. They will have an element of retention policy, but they're not backing your data up, and their terms and conditions clearly state it's not their responsibility. So one thing you need to look at when considering your backup, the design of your backup solution as a whole, where you have moved to the cloud, treat it as if it's the same as the data sat on your own server in premise, and look and see, is it backed up? Does the backup and retention policies and everything else match in with what you would need from your data that's sitting on site? Put there a new one, and this is perhaps one of the takeaways we're aiming for people as well. Immutability. It's a relatively new functionality within backup, and certainly new terminology in the tech industry, and it's getting banded around a little bit at the moment. But it's a method of protection against ransomware, and what it basically is it means that your backup is read-only. Basically makes it read-only, so you can't write to it, which means that even if you do get compromised, you get a cyber attack and it gets through, they can't write into that data set. So it's clean and it's kept clean at all times. So it really is a good new function that's built within your backup solution. So I would say it's certainly worth looking at that when you're thinking about your backup. Look into immutability. See if you can find a way of getting that incorporated into into your backup. It is fairly new. If you Google it, we might come up near the top, partly because we were early adopters of it, but it's certainly worth looking at when designing your system. I've put encryption on there, so that's not strictly backup. It's your backup solution should be encrypted, certainly encrypted at rest and when the data's in transit and making its way across to your backup. Well, the key area we see it with encryption is it's not going to help prevent you necessarily losing data, but it will prevent the wrong people getting access to it should something happen. Prime example of that is laptops. We strongly recommend encrypting all laptops, at least then if something does happen, it gets stolen out, a laptop does get stolen out of the boot, which still happens, at least that data is encrypted and secure. You may have lost the laptop, but someone's not got access into that data. That's the key area where we talk about encryption with customers. And of course, the backup is not just about cyber attacks. You've got the operational side of things, and that we all know about. Accidentally deleted files need recovering and going back to your backup, or the wider issue of a data loss due to maybe hardware or software failure. A server dies and you get it rebooted, or there's an issue on it, you reboot it, but you've lost that day's data as a result. Then you need a properly designed backup to be able to either pull a single file back or restore that data back to your server, and certainly consideration around again, it's a risk-based consideration about what that retention policy is, how often you back up, how far back you hold those data backups are all considerations when sort of designing your backup solution. The last one on there, I've just put about cloud backups. The cost of that has been reducing significantly over the last 4 or 5 years. It used to be quite expensive. Now it's getting to the stage where it's not. It gives a good option for that off-site backup should you need it to take something away from site. So again, certainly look into that as a potential option when you're designing your backup solution. Moving on to the cloud, touched on it a little bit with the backups there. What's the value of the cloud? Where does it fit in? It's quite a sweeping term that people use. The first thing I say, and we always say to people, it's not necessarily right for everybody in every solution, in every situation, but it can bring really great benefits in a number of areas. it can certainly increase the resilience and help remove single points of failure that are often in place with on-site solutions, and where servers are on site, it can be quite expensive to build in levels of resilience and take away all the single points of failure. If you use the cloud or design a cloud system in the right way, it should remove some of those single points of failure, whether that's in power, connectivity. That should be inbuilt within the cloud system, so it can remove single points of failure. It is definitely the natural choice with an increase, or if you've got a high proportion of remote working, because of that resilience, then there should be better connectivity in. Again, it should be designed in the right way, but can certainly help increase security, both physical and network security. The data center should be much more secure than your server room's likely to be, and it should have the network security that is potentially available. It could well be in excess of what you can do on premise at a reasonable cost. Capital expenditure is another thing to think about. It is, you move to the cloud, it is a move from a capital expenditure model to an operating expenditure model. That doesn't necessarily mean it'll be cheaper. It does need to be considered a little bit wider. And by that, what I mean is looking at the benefits that a move to the cloud brings. You should be looking at risk reductions with a move to the cloud, improved efficiencies, opening up future opportunities for improved ways of working. It sort of won't be alike, or it shouldn't be a like for like comparison often to just that single server or a couple of servers sitting on premise. Over a 5-year period, it may work out more expensive, but it also should bring a lot of other benefit with it. The operating sort of expenditure model also is easier and for sort of transparent budgeting. Often you've not got these sort of, say, 5-year, I picked 5 year because it's the typical life of a server, sort of 5-year spikes where you need to spend a significant amount of money on upgrading servers. Moving to a more operating expenditure model, it's a bit more consistent. Everything is up to date off the back of it. It should be up to date, so you've not got these big spikes in budgets. One thing to remember, and I guess my parting comment around the cloud, it does need good, reliable connectivity. Whereas if you're on premise, you've got your server sitting in your office, you don't need external connectivity to get into it. If you're in the office, with a move to the cloud, the connectivity is then key. People still do forget that sometimes. So my sort of last slide before I hand over to Matt, looking at the importance of a technology plan. I think even with sort of quite a limited number of technology topics, like I've really skimmed through quite quickly in the previous slides, you can sort of see how technology conversations can quickly become overwhelming with lots of sort of interdependencies. A decision on one thing impacts on something, so what you do on your cloud might impact on your backup, might impact on something else, on how you're working, and it can become quite overwhelming quickly. But it doesn't have to be, and I think part of the reason we see it becoming overwhelming is so many people still don't have a technology plan, and that's something that we see is absolutely key. But that technology plan should be built on to help achieve the organizational goals, not introduce sort of the next new great piece of technical innovation just because sort of techies like us think that it's great. There's this new shiny bit of tech out there, let's use it. It should be designed to achieve the organizational goals, and we're real strong believers on that. And what we've done, and we certainly embed within all our IT support partners what we call our strategic review, where the starting point of that is going in with customers. We need to understand the organisation and the organisational goals over the next 3-5 years, the current technology situation and where they're at, any current challenges. We certainly talk to the end user, find out what's happening on a day-to-day basis, and then we move into the more traditional sort of IT audit after that, and build a report and essentially a technology roadmap. But it's all based around risk and opportunity. So what risks do we identify might need closing? What opportunities are there to help achieve, and use the technology to achieve those operational goals? That's certainly one area I'd strongly recommend to everyone, to sort of take that approach. It gets you a nice holistic plan and a roadmap, look at everything. How can technology help you achieve those goals? And it really does help prevent you feeling overwhelmed by all these decisions and ideas. And certainly if you're not technical, all these different technical pieces that all come together, and perhaps the jargon. If you can take a step back and a holistic view, it does really help with that and have a roadmap. And obviously you can then put a budget to the roadmap, which really helps as well. The final point I've just got on there, I put on because I think it's very important, and most people know about it, but not everybody is. There's a lot of charity licensing models out there. They are generally very, very good from a pricing point of view, offer a lot of discounts. Microsoft Office 365, for example, the charity licensing discounts on there are really significant. So if you're thinking about anything, definitely have a look, see if there's any sort of charity licensing models out there. Definitely worth looking at. That's the end of my slides. Apologies again that it's very, very high level. Appreciate that. As I say, there are questions and answers time at the end, and we can have some calls if there's anything there you think, I need to know a little bit more about that area. Certainly we can organise a call after the event. But yeah, I will now hand over to Matt, who will tell us a little bit about some of the insights from Ashgate's perspective.
Great, thanks Ian. Good morning everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey, I guess, in the last 2 or 3 years. And to start with is why we look to use an outsourced MSP, managed service provider, rather than have an IT team in-house. And we have got one head of IT, but really it's back to what Ian's already talked about. And for me, it's a couple of things. Firstly, it's about the knowledge base. So just the breadth and depth of knowledge that we have access to through CT, we couldn't possibly replicate with an in-house team. I think there's a very simple cost business case as well. But when I look at actually the cost of resourcing up even a fairly basic in-house IT team with kind of first, second, third line resource, implementing our own service desk, we couldn't come close to the kind of costs that we're spending with an outsourced MSP. So so that really was a bit of a no-brainer for us. I think my background is in people. I've had the IT portfolio for about 3 years. So I'm still on that learning journey, but for me there's something also about recognizing that we are kind of consciously incompetent. I think I know there's a lot that we don't know. That's not just me, but it's our in-house IT expert as well. So really having that external support from someone like CT is invaluable. There are a couple of other really key things when it came to actually the decision to appoint CT over other providers. And one of those, which was really key for us, was around DevOps support, which those of you with an IT background will be familiar with. But it's that hybrid role that's emerged in recent years between the kind of the developer and kind of operations role. And we were starting to have conversations around things like new business development. We were talking in our leadership team about, where would we go if we wanted to develop an app? If we had a great idea for an app, who would do that for us? What about robotic process automation? So Ian's talked a little bit about automation. Who would do that for us? Who would do the automations? How would we start on that data capability journey? And I think a lot of IT providers have what I would describe as a traditional resource in terms of kind of dealing with infrastructure and hardware. But one of the things that CT were able to bring to the table was that DevOps resource. So that really was a big sell for us. The other thing for me, I think, was just recognizing just pre-pandemic the importance of smart working practices, of agile working. Ian's talked a bit already about the kind of pressure on space. But for me, with a people background as well, it's about recognizing how important that agile working is for staff as part of our employee value proposition. So I really wanted help with building a strategy that helped us kind of leverage technology to enable that remote working for our teams. ISO 27001, sorry Ian, just on the last slide. Again, actually CT were the only provider to have that. So that's beyond just the kind of the digital security. That includes all of the kind of paper-based sort of data security measures. It's kind of gold standard really. So we as an operational leadership team, but also a board, were really assured by those accreditations. Thanks, Ian. So where are Ashgate winning? We've come a long way in 3 years. There are certainly more areas I would say that we're winning on than just these 3 here. But I'll talk a little bit more about some of these when we look at some case studies. But certainly the move to secure remote working for our community nursing teams in particular, but actually for all staff, has been a big success for us. Not without some pain points, but certainly, when I've looked at some other organisations who have had to resort to quite archaic ways of trying to stay connected, I've been incredibly relieved that we were slightly ahead of the game with adopting 365 and starting to look at kind of VDI solutions. Resilience, Ian's talked about, and again, we will look at that as a case study in a moment. And with that adoption of 365 and the VDI solution, that's what's really enabled that remote working for our support staff as well as clinical teams. Okay. So first case study then is around the VDI solution, the remote access for clinical staff to SystmOne. So if we've got hospice partners on the call, I'm sure some of you will use SystmOne. We did have a VDI solution in place. The challenge we had with that was it still didn't allow us to access all of the different fields in SystmOne, which meant that although our clinicians could access elements of SystmOne in the field, they still had to come back to base to fully update the record. I think there were screens or fields such as place of death that for some reason we couldn't access. We also found quite quickly when the pandemic hit that the existing solution we had was not up to scratch. It was unsupported, and when we tried to scale it up, it fell over quite quickly. So we needed to rely on CT for a really rapid solution, which we couldn't possibly have done without the benefit of having an MSP in place. So CT responded really quickly to that and built us a virtual desktop interface, a VDI platform. And as the slide says there, that sits on CT's UK-based data centre, a company called Node 4. So we have a direct contract with them. And we've now got then a team of clinicians who can access everything they need to in the field. They don't need to come back to base. And as you can imagine, that's saved a huge amount of time and money in terms of things like mileage, but actually it means that our staff can see more patients. So this has got a direct impact on patient care, which is exactly what we're looking for. You can see there the reduction in tickets as well to the help desk. Many of those were because of the challenges we had with the previous system. And had we not moved to appoint CT, we would have still been, I think, probably trying to make something work that fundamentally was not up to standard. Thanks, Ian. The second big success, I think, was around the resilient connectivity. So in really simple terms, we had a single lease line, a single broadband line that if it went down, that was it really. We were stuffed. So as we started to move off premise and into the cloud, Ian's talked about the importance of that connectivity. So that was really something that we needed to solve, and again quite quickly in tandem with that VDI solution. So CT designed a solution for us and worked with our in-house head of IT to put that in place. We've now got 2 lease lines that run through 2 different exchanges. So worst case scenario, something desperate happens with BT or OpenReach, we've still got that resilience in a separate line that can serve all the needs for the hospice. Talked a little bit about speed there as well. I know when CT first undertook the strategic review for us, that involved talking to key stakeholders, and I remember a conversation that one of the team had with our medical director, and she had been struggling for months and months and months with aging hardware and really slow speeds. I think she was spending upwards of an hour a day trying to connect to systems. And of course, all of that stuff had gone unseen until we had that review. So understanding all of that enabled CT to put in place the right solution for us, which again has just made a huge impact to our staff. And there's nothing that grinds people down quite like recurrent challenges with IT. So solving that is a big win in terms of staff engagement for us as well. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Matt. Well, that's the end of sort of our presentation. As I said, I knew it was going to be tight on time, so apologies, it's probably a few minutes longer than we sort of said, but yeah, we tried to give very high level overview, so hopefully there's some useful points there. Now got a little bit of time, if everyone's okay still for time, for any questions, if anyone's got any questions sort of on any of those items or anything in general in terms of sort of the technology piece within the sector.
Hi Ian, it's Tom.
Hey Tom.
Hi. We have had a couple of questions come in from people who were unable to attend today. The first one, and it's something that you touched on a little bit earlier, but just the clarity around Office 365 and really the need to back that up. And I guess the question is the level of resiliency out of the box, if you like, and is there really a need to back 365 up? Yeah. Again, another common thing that we see, not just in this sector. It's fairly obviously Office 365 is relatively new in the volume of uptake that it's getting at the moment. A lot of people move into Office 365, and that's a lot of the questions or a lot of the conversations we're having at the moment are still around, you know, that exact one. Why should I back it up? And I suppose it's that misconception that I referred to earlier, that because we've moved to the cloud and it's Microsoft, it's their cloud, and it'll all be fine. That gets all the resilience I need. Everything's looked after, and yeah, it just isn't. And the concern is as Office 365 gets adopted more, some people are using it just for their emails, but more and more people are then utilising it for using OneDrive and utilising it for their file storage. They're using Teams. Obviously, a lot of the time files are going into Teams as well. If all that is sitting in that Microsoft's cloud, essentially, it is on Microsoft's retention policy, which changes on from time to time, but typically it's in around the 30-day point. And so if it's gone beyond that, if you accidentally delete an email and you don't realise, or there's a file, or then and it goes beyond that retention period, it's gone, and it's gone forever, and there'll be nothing you can do about it. And there are a lot of solutions out there now just to back up that Office 365. So it's taking, as I say, that same approach around your data and looking at it and going, well, how long do we need to back it up for? What is the data? What's the risk to us? And what should our backup and retention policy be on it? And yeah, there's a lot of solutions out there that you can do it. There's solutions out there where you can do an element of the immutable backup that I've spoken about earlier. But yeah, it's definitely worth looking at and including. You will be at risk of losing your data if you don't then back up Microsoft 365. Good stuff. And yeah, the second one, and this is quite a common one for us at the moment as well, is can you just explain how CT service ties in with Cyber Essentials?
It probably ties back into that plan and having a plan. So as part of our strategic review process, because we will do an element of your traditional IT audit, we will look at all those security areas and security fundamentals within the network. So and any gaps that we see would then fall into the report that comes out of it, that sort of risk-based report that I referred to very briefly earlier. They'd be highlighted in there. They may be a red or an amber sort of rating, depending on what they are, but they'd be in there. And off the back of that, when we look at the roadmap, and we'll be recommending some changes, and if we worked through then that roadmap and removed any issues that we'd found, the organisation would then be basically in a place where it can go for cyber essentials and it will pass. And we would have picked up all the things that are needed. And then sometimes we'll help some customers through that process as well. Because there's a bit of a form to fill in, and sometimes there can be questions, technical questions, that we can help out with and help fill the form in and submit it. But it will be a case of if you know everything that comes out in from a security point of view in our strategic review and the report that comes off the back of it, then you'll be in a place where you can get cyber essentials.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Was that it, Tom? Are there any others?
Yeah, they were the two that came in. Yeah, there's nothing else for us to touch on up to now. But obviously, like you say, if anyone wants to get in touch, if they've got any more in-depth questions, we can certainly run through that.
Simon may have one.
Yeah, sorry.
Simon.
Hi. In one of your first slides, you said about data and access to data. Have you built an integration to pull data from SystmOne at all, or do you rely on their standardized reporting?
We are working on it with Matt. It's a key thing that the standard reporting isn't the best. It's probably the best way to put it, or not. It can be a bit clunky, is what we've found, and it's a key thing. Certainly, Ashgate we're finding, and what we're working on with them now is creating basically a data warehousing function, so we can pull the data down.
Yeah.
Basically, what we're looking at is going, if we can get it into a SQL database and combine it with other elements, then we can start to create some. So you've got the data there to create whatever reporting you want, really, and get much more flexible on that reporting functionality. So almost move what we're doing is moving that reporting functionality out of SystmOne by taking a dump of that data and then being able to work and analyze the data outside of SystmOne. That's something that we see. It's a question we get asked quite a lot. Certainly around SystmOne, we've got a number of customers that utilise SystmOne, and the reporting is always a challenging. If they want anything, a bit more specific coming out there, it's a bit restrictive, is what we tend to find.
Thank you.
No problem. If no one else has got any questions, or there's nothing come through on the chat, Tom, to you, then thank you very much for joining us. As I said, we will pull everything together and send out to everyone, so copy of the slides, and we'll pull the questions and the answers together there. If anyone does have any other questions, or they want to talk to, I know it was, as I said, very, very high level based on the timings. If there is anything you want to talk to us in more depth about, just ask questions or pick our brains, whether it's technical or operational, then let us know, and be more than happy to get on a call. Other than that, thank you very much, guys, and maybe speak to you all soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.